This is SpaceTime, Series 28, Episode 153, for broadcast on the 29th of December 2025. Coming up on SpaceTime, the Ramses mission to study the Doomsday asteroid Apophis, solving the mysteries of existence, and the largest planetary nursery ever seen. All that and more coming up on SpaceTime.
Welcome to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary.
The European Space Agency has approved a new mission to study the Doomsday asteroid Apophis. The Ramses spacecraft will study the 450-metre-wide space rock as it swoops down close to the Earth on April the 13th, 2029. Apophis will fly by Earth at a distance of just 32,000 kilometres, and that's closer than the orbits of many satellites. Apophis is often called the Doomsday asteroid because early calculations back in 2004 warned of a 2.7% chance of the asteroid slamming into the Earth. There were real fears that it was on an impacting orbit. But as more and more observations about the asteroid's orbit came in, that possibility was eventually ruled out. So, the good news is it wasn't going to crash into the planet in 2029, but it was going to come awfully close. However, further calculations suggested that depending on how the Earth's gravitational pull affects Apophis during that close encounter, the asteroid would pass through a sort of, well, I guess you'd call it a gravitational keyhole, about 800 metres in diameter. And if it went through the keyhole in the right way, it could be set up for a future impact on Earth exactly 7 years later on Easter Sunday, April the 13th, 2036. In fact, the possibility of an Earth-impacting collision kept the threat at a level 1 on the Torino impact scale until August 2006. That's when enough observations of the asteroid's orbit were available to rule out any likelihood of a collision. However, for a while there, Apophis did set the record as the highest rating ever on the Torino scale. And it's not worth getting too comfortable. It's estimated that an asteroid as big as Apophis comes close to the Earth every 800 years or so. And it's also estimated that an asteroid that size hits the Earth at least once every 80,000 years, on average. That means we're already overdue for the next impact. The Ramses mission will be a joint venture between the European Space Agency and the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA. It will launch in April 2028, arriving at Apophis in February 2029, providing a unique opportunity to study the effects of Earth's gravitational tidal forces on asteroids, in the process gaining new information necessary for future planetary defence. Ramses will be equipped with a high-resolution imager that will observe the shape and surface of the asteroid and characterise possible changes caused by Earth's gravitational pull. See, at that distance, Earth's immense gravity will slightly deform the asteroid, influence its rotation, and possibly even trigger small debris avalanches on the asteroid's surface, exposing material in its interior to the surface which would otherwise have remained hidden. The imager will be able to analyse the reflectance of the surface at different wavelengths to determine its mineralogical and chemical composition, as well as the physical properties of the rocks and dust exposed on the surface. The flyby will allow astronomers a chance to study this asteroid in great detail. The data obtained from the mission will be crucial to improving mechanisms for protecting planet Earth from future asteroid impacts, as well as to better understand the formation and evolution of these small celestial bodies. This report from ESA TV.
Friday the 13th of April 2029 will be humankind's lucky day. Apophis will safely pass Earth at a distance of less than 32,000 kilometers. An asteroid this large passes this close to Earth once every roughly 7,000 years, and the European Space Agency will have a front row seat. Meet Ramses. ESA's space safety program is sending Ramses to rendezvous with Apophis and study the asteroid up close as it is pulled and stretched by Earth's gravity. Ramses will deploy two smaller spacecraft to help it record any changes to the asteroid's orbit, rotation, surface, and interior. With Ramses, ESA is capitalizing on a unique opportunity to learn how asteroids react to strong forces, and how we could push one off of a collision course if we are not so lucky next time. When the world looks up to see Apophis passing overhead, Ramses will be flying alongside, providing close-up images and learning how to keep Earth safe.
This is SpaceTime. Still to come, scientists may finally have found an explanation for why the universe exists, and we look at the largest planetary nursery ever seen. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime. Scientists may finally have found an explanation for why the universe exists. See, the problem's always been that equal amounts of matter and antimatter were created in the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago. And the thing is, matter and antimatter annihilate each other when they come into contact. So theoretically, the universe should have disappeared in a flash of blue gamma-ray radiation moments after it formed, leaving behind nothing but a barren, empty radioactive void. Yet here we are, in a matter-dominated universe. This phenomenon is known as the charge parity or CP violation, and it can't be explained by physics, at least not until now. Physicists at CERN, the European Organisation for Nuclear Research, have been using the world's largest particle accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider, to observe a slight imbalance in the way matter and antimatter behave during high-energy collisions. The Large Hadron Collider is a massive atom smasher located in a 27-kilometre-long circular tunnel near Geneva, deep under the Franco-Swiss border. Packets of subatomic particles are accelerated around the collider in two tubes in opposite directions, travelling at some 99.9999% the speed of light. These particles can then be made to smash into each other at four massive detectors located in huge cathedral-like caverns situated around the collider, where the impact debris and its decay constituents can be studied. Now, a report in the journal Nature claims that in an analysis of some 80,000 decays of a particle known as the Lambda Beauty baryon, scientists have discovered that its antimatter counterpart decays just a little bit differently, about 2.5%, compared to its matter particle. Now, that 2.5% may not sound like much, but statistically it's a significant deviation. And the discovery itself has only a 1 in 10 million chance of being a fluke. So, a tiny imbalance in the universe when it came into being favoured matter over antimatter. And that tiny microscopic difference was enough to allow all the stars, planets, galaxies, and life to emerge. It's not the first time CP violation had been detected, but the only previous detection was in mesons. In other words, this is the first time that such an asymmetry has been found in baryons. The findings are hugely significant because they bring scientists a step closer to understanding how everything we know about has survived and our universe has evolved. This is SpaceTime. Still to come, the largest birthplace of planets ever found, and later in the science report, the possible discovery of a new ancient human species. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime. Astronomers have observed the largest planetary nursery ever seen, located in a massive protoplanetary disk orbiting a distant young star. The findings, reported in the Astrophysical Journal, are showing an incredibly chaotic and turbulent environment, with wisps of material stretching further above and below the disk than astronomers had ever expected. Even more strangely is the dichotomy of the filaments. They seem to be far more visible on one side of the disk than the other. And no one's quite sure why. The disk, catalogued as IRAS 23077 plus 6707 and nicknamed Dracula's Shavito, is located 1,000 light-years away in the direction of the constellation Cepheus. Now, in case you're wondering, a chavito is a Uruguayan sandwich of sliced beefsteak, mozzarella, ham, tomatoes, mayonnaise, and either black or green olives. Of course, Dracula could never have really eaten one because, well, after all, vampires only consume blood. Still, the name playfully reflects the heritage of the study's authors, one of whom is from Transylvania in Romania and the other from Uruguay. And in fact, the edge-on view of this protoplanetary disk really does resemble a sort of hamburger, with a dark central lane flanked by glowing top and bottom layers of dust and gas. The observations were made using NASA's Hubble Space Telescope. They mark a new milestone for Hubble, shedding light on how planets may form in extreme environments. This massive protoplanetary disk spans some 650 billion kilometres. Now, that's some 40 times the diameter of our entire solar system, measured from the very outer edge of the Kuiper Belt. The disk obscures the young star at its centre. Scientists think it's possibly either a hot massive star or maybe a pair of smaller sun-like stars. And this enormous disk is not only the largest known planetary forming disk ever seen, it's also shaping up as the most unusual. The study's lead author, Christina Monch, from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, says the level of detail seen in this image is rare in protoplanetary disk observations. It shows how planetary nurseries really can be far more active and chaotic than what's expected. Astronomers are seeing this disk nearly edge-on, and its wispy upper and lower asymmetric layers are especially striking. Both Hubble and Webb Space Telescopes have imaged similar structures in other disks. But this new observation is providing an exceptional perspective, tracing its substructures in visible light in unprecedented detail. And that makes this system incredibly unique, a new laboratory for studying planetary formation and the environments where it can happen. The impressive height of these extended filaments wasn't the only thing that captured the attention of scientists. The new images also revealed that vertically imposing filament-like features appear on just one side of the disk, while the other appears to have a sharp edge and no visible filaments. This peculiar lopsided structure suggests that dynamic processes like a recent inflow of dust and gas or interactions with its surroundings is shaping the disk. Astronomers already know that all planetary systems are formed from disks of gas and dust encircling young stars. Over time, through static electricity, gas and dust tends to clump together, eventually growing massive enough for gravity to take over and accrete more and more material until a planet's formed. Finally, the gas and dust that doesn't go to making the planet accretes onto the star. And so what we're seeing in this new protoplanetary disk may simply represent a scaled-up version of our own early solar system, what it looked like 4.6 billion years ago, but with a massive disk estimated to be 10 to 30 times that of Jupiter, ample material for forming multiple gas giants. Monch says in theory, this new system could host a vast planetary network. While planetary formation may differ in such massive environments, the underlying processes are thought to still be similar. But following these new observations, astronomers have more questions than answers. Luckily, these new images are a great starting point for understanding how planets form over time and in what sort of different environments they can evolve. This is SpaceTime. And time now to take a brief look at some of the other stories making news in science this week with a science report. A new study has found that sleep apnea is linked to a 40% higher chance of developing some sort of mental health problem. The findings, reported in the Journal of the American Medical Association, is based on data from a long-term aging study in Canada used to identify older people who are likely to suffer from sleep apnea. Almost 28,000 older Canadians were followed for an average of 3 years for the study, about 7,500 of whom suffered from sleep apnea. Looking at various indicators of mental health problems, the authors found that sleep apnea was linked to about a 40% higher chance of having a mental health problem at the beginning of the study, and a 44% higher chance of mental health problems by the end of the study. Paleontologists from La Trobe and Cambridge universities have challenged the classification of one of the world's most complete human ancestral fossils, raising the possibility that it actually represents a new hominid or human species. The fossil, found in South Africa's famous Sterkfontein caves in 1998, was dubbed Littlefoot and had been widely believed to be a member of the Australopithecus genus, a lineage of ape-like upright walkers that lived in Africa between 3 million and 1.95 million years ago. Littlefoot, known formally as STW573, remains one of the most complete ancient hominids in the fossil record. But the new research, reported in the American Journal of Biological Anthropology, claims Littlefoot doesn't share the unique suite of traits of other Australopithecus genus species. And that is raising the possibility that it may actually represent a new, previously unidentified human relative. And that highlights the need for further careful evidence-based taxonomy. Doctors have reported the unusual case of a fit, healthy man in his 50s who ended up having a stroke and extremely high blood pressure after consuming an average of 8 cans of energy drinks every day. Now, that's some 3 times the recommended maximum daily intake of caffeine. Now, once he was weaned off the beverage, the patient's blood pressure did eventually return to normal, but he didn't regain full feeling on his left side. A fascinating study reported in the British Medical Journal suggests that energy drinks may cause cardiovascular disease and stroke, but importantly, this may also be reversible. A new study warns there's a growing number of people who are starting to doubt the science behind climate change because of misinformation propaganda campaigns spread by vested interests. The research, carried out for the Times by YouGov and the opinion consultancy firm Public First, compared 2025 opinions on climate change with polls carried out back in 2021. They found that 50% of people now think concerns about climate change have been over-exaggerated, and that compares to just 25% 4 years ago. Back in 2021, 16% of people believed warnings about climate change were not as real as scientists claimed, and that's now gone up to 25% today. And despite the science from countless studies, 16% of people now think global warming is not the result of human activity. That's an increase of 5% over the past 4 years. The skeptic's Tim Mendham says the survey shows that vested interests propaganda really is working.
Yes, we're seeing propaganda and general misinformation all over the place, and it's definitely increasing. The medium of choice is obviously social media. Social media is the railway track upon which the disinformation drives its train through everything. Yeah, whether it's vaccination, health issues, whether it's phony cures or wellness things, whether it's sort of conspiracy theories generally, and climate change is suffering as much as anything else. Now, there's surveys that come out that the Times did one through YouGov fairly recently. They compared it with 2 surveys over a period of 4 or 5 years, and they found that people who think the dangers of global warming have increased by more than 50%. That's the number of Brits who think that way. 16% believe that warnings about climate change are not as real as scientists have said. That was in 2021. In 2025, they're saying it's 25%, so that's increasing as well. Similarly, 16% think global warming is not the result of human activity, which is 5% more than it was 4 years ago. So, I mean, yes, the impact of misinformation and propaganda is having an effect, and that's why it flourishes. If it didn't have an effect, it would disappear. One of the problems is you have to look at the sources of the misinformation, and a lot of it comes from people with vested interests. One of the big proponents of anti-climate change group was found to have had billions invested in fossil fuels. So, I mean, they have a vested interest in making sure that we don't drop fossil fuels by the wayside. There's all sorts of things that people are taking advantage of. They're suggesting that reacting to climate change and changing your energy mix will increase the cost of energy, and people in straitened times will react badly to that.
How big a problem is the fact that electricity prices have gone up so much, it's becoming a major cost burden for the average Australian consumer?
Yeah, okay.
Climate change is real. In my humble opinion, the way we're combating it is not appropriate. The use of renewables works to some degree, but they're not looking at the downstream problems associated with that. I have a problem with wind turbines because of bird strike. As a lifelong member of the RSPCA, that's an issue for me. But I don't have a problem with having all roofs with solar panels on them.
Yeah.
We've got to reach net zero, but the problem is how we're doing it.
Electricity prices have gone up a huge amount over the last, say, 10 years or so. And I think part of the problem is that you have an ageing fleet of power generation. Coal-fired power stations are getting old, they're getting less efficient, they're getting fewer of them. And certainly in Australia, when they privatised all the generation of electricity, there was a big increase in price. The suggestion was that because it was a private sector, they'd be more efficient and the price would go down. I know that from a personal point of view that this was the policy because I wrote half of it myself way back when, and that proved not to be the case. It actually proved that as soon as you got it into the private sector hands, the price went up because they had a monopoly on the system. And also they started sort of what you call gold plating the infrastructure, which might have been allowed to run down a bit in the public sector, and that raised the price as well. So there's a whole range of different reasons.
It's like Eraring aren't that old. Eraring's the biggest power station in the country. It's not that old.
Still in the 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's old. That's 50 years old. How long do you want these things to run? Yeah, anyway, there are issues with the infrastructure and the replacement factor is slow with renewable energy, although in Australia, the generation of solar power with rooftop solar power has been enormous. Just obviously taken off and has obviously has some reason for doing so.
That's the Skeptic's Tim Mendham, and this is Space Time. And that's the show for now. SpaceTime is available every Monday, Wednesday and Friday through Bytes.com, SoundCloud, YouTube, your favourite podcast download provider, and from spacetimewithstuartgary.com. SpaceTime's also broadcast through the National Science Foundation on Science Zone Radio and on both iHeartRadio and TuneIn Radio. And you can help to support our show by visiting the SpaceTime store for a range of promotional merchandising goodies, or by becoming a SpaceTime patron, which gives you access to triple-episode commercial-free versions of the show, as well as lots of bonus audio content which doesn't go to air, access to our exclusive Facebook group, and other rewards. Just go to spacetimewithstuartgary.com for full details.
You've been listening to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary. This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.